talked about Hawaii and Puerto Rico. Which is the hottest region for you in terms of penetration, where you walk in, the climate is right, the roof structure is right,
Mhm.
the awareness and desire to adopt renewable energy is high. Which is that region in the country?
Well, we're really broadening out the penetration, if you will, across the country. So we and didn't realize it as we went into the year, but we'll open several states, and really it's across the Midwest. So I think we opened Missouri yesterday, as a matter of fact, and so we're seeing a broadening of the geographies that make sense, financially.
Yes.
Why is that? Because the technology is improving not only on performance but also on cost. And I do predict that once we get through what is a broad-based economic supply chain problem,
Yes.
however long that takes,
Yes.
we'll see another leg down in costs, in particular the battery side of things. So we're pretty confident in that, actually, given what we're seeing. So, when you look at the best places, first and foremost in the United States, Hawaii is approaching or has passed 40% of all single-family homes in Hawaii have solar
Oh,
now.
really?
Yes.
That is
In fact,
amazing.
I would say that it's very difficult to say if you're in Hawaii that you never heard that solar saves you money, and solar and storage is now mandated by us and other service providers. So we have a 100% attachment rate of storage there. We've had it for a number of years, as well as in our other island markets, Guam, Saipan, Puerto Rico, which I'll get to in a minute. But Hawaii is just, you're getting around to it because it's made so much financial sense for so long to
Yes.
go and sign up for solar service from us or one of our competitors. It's just an adoption rate. And so we do see eventually, I don't know what the top end rate is. Is it 75%? Could it go all the way to 100%,
Yes.
with some credit wrapping from the government as they do the utilities? It's quite likely to do that, but it probably takes certainly another few years. So that's the biggest penetration rate. The places where we're seeing a lot of uptake over the last few years is, of course, the West Coast, led by California, but also the Southwest, where places like Arizona, Nevada, even New Mexico, and then you go into the Northeast, so Mid-Atlantic, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, those states, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, et cetera. And those states now being joined by Florida, and to some degree the Carolinas as well, have had a lot of uptake over the years. Why is that? Some accommodative policies, certainly, and not any sort of local subsidies. That's been
Mhm.
mostly gone over the last many years, but high utility prices primarily drive that.
Yes.
The place where we've seen a lot, and we created the market, is Puerto Rico in the
Okay.
Caribbean. So Puerto Rico happens to be one of the most populated islands on the planet. Very, very good place. It makes a lot of sense for our business. We've got a lot of war stories of repairing an entire fleet of residential solar systems post Maria.
Yes.
And we have worked out a deal with the governor at that point in time to mandate an attachment rate of storage of 100%. And so since 2017, we've had a 100% storage attachment rate, which is really, the uptake there in Puerto Rico is quite good, because it very much makes sense, both economically and then to address the reliability and resiliency that the island so desperately needs. And so that's another area which has experienced extremely fast growth for us over the last few years, including the last few months.
Your success in Hawaii and Puerto Rico, and I'm surprised that I don't know the answer to this question. Where did Hawaii and Puerto Rico generate power before solar arrived? Was that from oil and gas? How did they generate power? I mean, I don't know if they have um, hydroelectric. I can't imagine.
No, no, they do have quite a bit of a diversified power base at this, fuel base at this point in time. For those that go to Hawaii, you can see some of the wind turbines and so forth. But the prior to, like, say, if you go rewind the clock 10 years ago,
Yes.
it was all oil-fired generation, for the most part. I say all for the most part. The vast majority, I would say 80+% was oil-fired generation. So when you look at these islands and then you start looking at other islands in the Caribbean and the Pacific, you start to say, well, and this is why we opened Puerto Rico. We looked at Hawaii and said, well, you've got oil-fired generation, very expensive, very dirty, and you've got reliability issues with nothing, if nothing else, with hurricanes and typhoons. Where else does this look familiar? And by the way, most of these power systems on these islands were primarily developed, in some cases, literally by the US military right after World War II.
Okay.
And so you have very aging infrastructure
Yes.
as well. So you have essentially taking new technology with solar and storage, plus now adding load managers and the ability to manage that system, that home, like a utility system we call a nanogrid. Literally, when you look at it from a sheer economic standpoint, no subsidies.
Yes.
This is an obvious choice from the consumer, or we call it down in Texas, shooting fish in a barrel.
Yes. Now that makes sense, because the cost of energy, the cost of power on these islands has to be much higher than the cost of power here in Houston, Texas. So you're right. It's a fish in a barrel. You can go in and own those markets. And I guess fortunately for a company like you, there are enough islands, not just close to the US, but all over the world, which probably have a similar issue. I guess the question is, you probably need to go to places like Puerto Rico and Hawaii, where the population density is higher, because
It does help. It does help. I would say that we can make it work. Like Guam is a fairly smallly populated island, and Saipan, even Tinian, which most people don't know where Tinian is, but Tinian is a part of the Northern Marianas, which is a territory of the United States. We have customers on Tinian. So Tinian had the distinction of being the largest air base in the entire world in 1945.
Okay.
So it's very much an island that's carved its name in history, but nobody really knows about. But we certainly don't have a lot of people that live there. But we have found it economical to go ahead and serve those islands. And so, yes, it makes a lot more sense to have highly populated islands from an economic standpoint for us in, say, places like Puerto Rico. But we've still found it to be economic to go to places that have a fraction of Puerto Rico's population.